Hello, my name is Tuomas, this is Sound of Free, and in this video I will give you my thoughts on this classic Beach Boys album, Today, which was released in 1965. And I feel that this album is completely underrated and a lot of times overlooked because it came prior Summer Days and Summer Nights and obviously Pet Sounds. But in many ways, I personally feel that this is, dare I say it, as great as Pet Sounds. It's very similar in style, production, and the themes that it centers around. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, this album was released before the Beatles released and recorded Rubber Soul. And Rubber Soul is a great album, and a lot of times it is talked about as this first major mainstream rock and roll concept album. Obviously its footprint is huge and its influence is probably a lot greater than the one of today's, but in a way I feel that Rubber Soul kind of steals that title or that honor from Today, because Today is just as much a concept album as is Pet Sounds. But before we dive into the songs and themes and all that stuff, I want to share a few words of the cover art, which I think is fabulous. In a lot of ways, I know the Pet Sounds album cover is these days considered almost in an little like a sarcastic or not like ironic way, I guess is the word, legendary. A lot of mock-ups are being made of it, and it's been parodied for decades. And I personally love the Pet Sounds album cover. I don't think it's bad, but the Today album cover I think it just blows it out of the water. The typography, the colors, and the cool shot of the guys over here by the pool with the sweaters, which doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, I love the album cover. The back cover is just a basic mid-60s album cover by the Capitol, so it's not anything special. But let's go straight into the songs. A lot of times the Beach Boys album sequencing, the track lists feel a little bit shaky, even though the material is 95% of the times killer, but just the track lists itself are kind of weird a lot of times, but not on this one. It follows the same style with the Christmas album that was released the prior year, meaning that the side A is filled with rockers and side 2 is filled with ballads, and it works really well. And this album starts with Do You Wanna Dance, which is a cover. There's another cover as well, I'm So Young, but all the other tracks are originals by Brian. And you got to mention it, Mike wrote pretty much all the lyrics on this album with Brian, but it's all Mike, and that's one of the things that don't get mentioned enough. Mike really could write excellent lyrics. These lyrics are straight up there with the lyrics that Tony Asher wrote for Pet Sounds, and to me, thinking about it from a historical point of view, I guess, it tells to me that Brian had a lot of saying, or a big hand in also writing the lyrics, even though they are credited to, in this case, to Mike, and on Pet Sounds' case to Tony. But the similarities on this album and Pet Sounds, especially the lyrics, are so visible, they are so clear, that to me it just speaks that Brian had a big hand in writing the lyrics to both of the albums as well. It's also interesting to point out that Dennis's lead vocal that starts off this album with Do You Wanna Dance kind of bookends the album also with the last track, In the Back of My Mind. And I'm not counting the Bull Sessions with Big Daddy as a song or a track, because it's not a song, it's just a little goofy snippet at the end of this album. So to me, In the Back of My Mind ends this album. Works really well as this sort of book ending thing. I love that. His voice was excellent during this time period. he was still young, and his voice was very clean and powerful, and very much different than what you hear in the 70s. Anyway, let's move forward. Do You Wanna Dance? My favorite thing besides Dennis's vocals on that track is the timpani drums that just rock so hard. If you really pump up the volume, you'll hear them very well. They are like thunder. It's a very interesting album because production-wise you still have the Beach Boys playing there. You have Dennis on drums on most of the tracks. You have Carl on guitar, I think, in each track, and Al is there, and even Mike is playing tambourine or something, I guess. And Brian is all over the tracks, obviously. And still you have the session musicians coming in during this time period. But not fully, not like on Pet Sounds. So it's an interesting sound to hear those surf guitar licks by Carl and Dennis's drums, obviously. But then you have those timpani drums, those classical instruments, and all kinds of horns and strings and stuff like that you wouldn't normally hear on a rock and roll album. So this is, to me, very interesting sound-wise. But anyhow, let's move forward. Good to My Baby, it's a very good rocker, and a lot of these songs, they deal with the similar themes, mostly in the same style as Pet Sounds. You have these sort of relationship songs, and even if the song itself is very happy-go-lucky, like Good to My Baby or Help Me Rhonda or Dance Dance Dance, which all are very upbeat songs, then you have something to balance it off on the lyrics. So for example, Good to My Baby, or basically each of these tracks, Help Me Rhonda is a great example, and Dance 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 too. You have character of the song, so to speak, is not in a good place in his life, with his relationship or whatever is that particular case in that song. Like Don't Hurt My Little Sister, that's a great one, great example. Or Help Me Rhonda, the main guy in the song isn't really in a happy place. The song itself is extremely happy, and you wouldn't really think about it if you didn't know English or just didn't, think about the lyrics at all. So you wouldn't really think much about it. But if you really think about the story behind these tracks, they are kind of depressing, and I love that. When I Grow Up to Be a Man, one of the all-time great classics. I mean, that is straight up from the same vein and the same place that Pet Sounds material. I would even argue that if When I Grow Up would be, as it's titled over here, would be on Pet Sounds, it would be one of the better tracks on that album. So it's that good. A very adult type of way of looking at getting older, at the point where you are still a teenager, basically. It's always been a very touching song to me, and it's very very major, I guess is the word. Dance Dance Dance, which I feel is one of the best rock and roll songs the Beach Boys ever did. That guitar lick over there, that riff or whatever you want to call it, the fast rhythm of it, the vocals, Mike sounds so cool on it, and the whole group, the whole thing is so tight. And once again, it's the kind of song that it sounds very happy, but when you think about the story behind the actual lyrics, the character of the story isn't really in a happy place. He kind of wants to forget with dancing. I mean, it sounds, today it might sound a little bit cheesy. I'm just gonna mention this fast because we are talking about this period of the group right now with these songs. I've seen not a lot of, but some recent reviews online and forums and you name it. These are not my thoughts, but I've seen them and heard them, that some of the tracks on this album and maybe on Summer Days and Summer Nights, but especially on Pet Sounds, Caroline No, for example, and maybe like Don't Hurt My Little Sister and some of the songs on side 2 on this album as well, that they are misogynistic. Like I remember so vividly a review that I read some time ago of some of the tracks on this album. There was also talk about Pet Sounds, that something like, otherwise it's a great album, but the way the lyrics are written, the main character, so to speak, of the songs is so horrible, and you know, this sort of stuff. And I don't see it that way at all. I feel that the way the relationships described in this album and on Pet Sounds as well is a much more major way of describing relationships. It's not anymore just the sort of I love you, everything is just excellent sort of naive thing. It's much more about realizing that you were naive previously, and now you are facing the, you know, the consequences of your decisions that you made when you were maybe a little bit more naive or unexperienced and stuff like that. You know, so I feel that the themes on this one, and especially on Pet Sounds, but we'll talk more about that maybe in some later video, are, like I said, major and just adult, more adult-like, more rooted in true life, you know, something that a lot of people can comprehend, and they know these things from their own life, and that is what makes them timeless. And the relationships are complicated. They are not just, it's not that simple anymore. Please Let Me Wonder, one of the all-time best Brian Wilson compositions. What can you really say about it? It just makes me completely speechless to even think about that track. If you haven't heard it, please go listen. It's a pretty damn good song. The lead vocal by Brian on that one is one of the best that he ever did. And you can hear that great, like, if I just close my eyes and think about the song, even the intro, you can just hear that great guitar, that guitar sound. It's just so beautiful. And once again, just the story in the song itself is so heartbreaking. It's very real, honest, pure, and there's a lot of stuff in the subtext, which is what I love. And I'm not a lyric kind of guy, really, but I just love these sort of lyrics with a lot of subtext. Well, I'm So Young, it completely fits on this album, even though it's a cover song. Great cover, and it sounds like Brian had, especially around this time period, he had a way of doing a cover song, but turning it kind of like, you know, in like it was his song. So he did a lot of cool things with production and arrangement wise to make the song sound like his. Even though he didn't change a lot of things, you can still hear the original in it, but he just was able to somehow put his own magic into it. And I'm So Young is a great example of that. Hushabye is one other great example. She Knows Me Too Well. This track is a great example of what I was talking about previously. It's very easy to get confused by the story of the song. It's not an easy relationship that you are hearing described in this song. So I completely understand how these days some people might get offended by some of these tracks in some way. Some way I do understand it, but I don't know, it feels so real. These things happen, relationships are hard, they are not as simple as a lot of times is described in popular music or movies. It's hard to tell the truth and be as honest as the storytelling is on this album, and also on Pet Sounds. In the back of my mind, once again, one of the best songs on this album, one of the best tracks the Beach Boys ever did. I love the solo version by Brian from, I think it's from 75 or 74. It was released on Brian's No Peer Pressure Deluxe version. I don't think it's on Spotify, but search it out. I'm sure you can find it from YouTube. If you haven't heard it, go and listen to that. It's excellent. It's just as good as this one. It's more jazzy, very interesting arrangement. But Dennis's lead vocal on this one is so good, and each time I hear this song, it sends chills to my spine. And I love the way it ends. This whole song is so interesting. It doesn't have a chorus. It doesn't have the usual pop song structures. It really isn't even a rock song. It's a mood piece, I would say. Very musical, and the arrangement is excellent. And Dennis really is able to just deliver that emotion that the song requires. What a song to end the album. I mean, it's full of fear, and it's full of doubts and insecurities. It's a very honest song, something you, in a rock and roll world, you don't hear that type of lyrics that often, so I dig it. And then after, in the back of my mind, we have obviously Bull Sessions with Big Daddy, the Big Daddy, which is a little snippet of a conversation with the whole group after the European tour, and they share their thoughts on some of the things they experienced there, and I think they are eating French fries, and you know, it's just a casual little funny, I think it's like a minute or two long conversation piece, mostly just a comedic relief to, you know, fill up the album. It's not that long album. I think the length is about 28 minutes. So, you know, I like it. I think it's a fun listen. It's fun to hear their, you know, youthful voices, and it always cracks me up to hear the name Dick Risen. I know he was a real guy actually, so it's not just a joke, but it works as a joke really well as well. So yeah, today, personally, I dare say this, to me this is probably even a more important album personally than Pet Sounds. The songs matter a lot to me, and I know this album is very much respected. So when I say that this is underrated, I don't mean that it's underrated in sense of that it wouldn't be well loved, because obviously it was praised when it was released. It influenced the Beatles. If we think about this album today, what it means today to record buying audiences or, you know, music listeners, not much. You never hear people talking about the stories behind the album. It's glossed over in the Beach Boys documentaries. It's not as documented as Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds, I feel it steals a lot of the recognition that this album deserves. In that sense, I feel that this album is underrated. It deserves all the love that it gets, but I feel that it would and does deserve a lot more as well. But hey, these were my thoughts on the Beach Boys Today album. What do you think about it? What did you think about it when it was released? If you were alive back then and a fan, I would be very interested in hearing thoughts, or like how people received it back then. Because it's very much like Pet Sounds, and you always hear about Pet Sounds how the fans were confused by it. They didn't like it and stuff like that. But did Today album receive the same sort of reception? I would love to hear more about that. Thanks for watching. I'm doing these reviews sort of in a chronologic order, so check out my prior reviews of the prior albums. I know I skipped the Christmas album, but that is because I don't own it personally. I'm still searching for it. I love that album, but I'm probably gonna do a review of it some Christmas, but you know, not in the middle of the summertime. Next one, we are like, you know, the albums that are coming next are big ones, and I'm kind of scared of doing reviews of them. So we'll see how I am gonna able to, you know, pull them off. But hopefully we'll continue with the album review series soon. Thanks for watching once again. Take care. Bye bye.